This semester, you will write a short paper every week, which will be due on Sundays. These papers are opportunities to practice various reading and writing skills. Your first paper is a personal narrative. The focus of the next 2 months will be writing about and responding to other people's ideas. Our Ways of Reading unit will practice various approaches to looking at other texts using summary, response, analysis, evaluation, and synthesis. We will be focusing on what they say. This narrative is an opportunity to focus on what you say. In academic writing, finding the balance between what they say and what you say is one of the most important skills to learn. The theme of this English 1102 is problems in higher education, and many of the articles we'll be reading have an attitude about young folks and college students. These older people fear the changes they see happening in higher education and in culture in general. They have a lot to say about kids these days. I always wonder how many of them really know any kids these days. Many of you are probably in the Generation Z age group, which are often the target of the opinions given in these articles. Some of you might be in one of the other generational groups. I was born in 1980, so I sit right in between Generation X and Generation Y. Sometimes when people complain about kids these days, they call them millennials. But I, a 40-year-old woman with a family, am considered an elder millennial. What it boils down to is the fact that generational conflict has an impact on our discussions about the university system, and the differing values of each group can make these discussions more difficult. It is helpful to enter these debates with a clear sense of your own values. So, this personal narrative is an opportunity to defend yourself against you and your generation against the grumpy old-timers. This is the prompt that will guide your paper. What do you wish these professors, pundits, and parents knew about you and your generation? What can these older people learn from your generation? The word pundit refers to someone who has lots of public opinions, so they're the ones you're responding to. If you're not in Generation Z, please respond with your own experience, whatever that might be. So, what is a narrative? It is a story about the writer's own experiences that ends in reflection. The key word here is story. Let's take a moment and think about what techniques and elements you would expect to see in a narrative or story that wouldn't necessarily be in an argumentative essay. Think of what you might encounter while reading a book. So I'm going to just sit here for half a second. What you think? Okay, well, here's the list I came up with. Characters, dialogues, description, sensory details, setting, plot, conflict, action, and voice. There are probably more. Some essential elements I hope to see in your narratives are the first person I. You will need to refer to your own real lived experiences. Something in particular in your life that exemplifies what you want to emphasize in your paper. So yes, please use I. Finally, finish up with some reflection about what your narrative means or illustrates. It bears repeating. Please use I. This may be different from what you learned about in high school. Okay, here's some of the nitty-gritty info you'll need. This information will apply to a good hunk of the papers you'll be writing this semester. Your paper should be around 2 pages in length, give or take depending. I recommend 12-point font, double-spaced, but I won't be legalistic about it. I like PDFs because Moodle recognizes and renders them the quickest of all the file formats. The paper is due next Sunday at midnight, and it is worth 6 points. You can find all that information also on Moodle. I grade all of these assignments using a grading guide that looks something like this. The grading guide is available on the assignment page on Moodle. One of your assignments this week is to practice applying the grading guide to an example essay. On Moodle, there are a couple of resources you should know about. In the pacing guide on Sundays, you will have a link that takes you to the prompt and the place to submit your weekly paper. You can also click on the assignment link in the resources below the pacing guide and mark it as done. The assignment page has other instructions and the place to submit the paper. Another resource to note is the course resources box on the right side of our Moodle homepage. If you click on the example booklet, you'll be able to access examples of every paper you'll write this semester. I personally find it helpful to look at examples. In fact, before I let you go, let's look at an example excerpt from an example narrative. You'll read the whole thing later this week and practice filling out the grading guide for it. All right, the title of the paper is Instagramma. The sun shining, the cool breeze blowing, and the happiness of playing with the puppy was all that was on my mind. "You got a girl yet?" my grandma asked me, ruining the moment. I replied with the usual answer to avoid any conversation about girls. "No, I don't." "Well," Grandma starts to insinuate that she's about to drop some knowledge on me. "I am so glad that you aren't dating anybody. The only thing the girls, especially young girls, want these days is to get married and to start popping out babies. Stay away from that, you hear?" "Actually, that's the opposite of what girls want these days, Grandma. I'm sure there's some out there that still want that, but the ones I talk to want a successful future in their school and career relationships and just life in general." "Oh," was all she could say back. I know that my comment had shut her down because she was trying to give me some good dating advice. I thought to myself, that was stupid. You are her first grandson. At least you can do is listen. Even if she is wrong, you can just say, "Thank you, Grandma. I'll be sure to be careful out there." She continued to swing on the tree swing while I went back to playing fetch with the new puppy. I didn't say anything, but offered the ball to play fetch. She smiled and threw it to the dog. So, some of the good things that I noticed in this example: dialogue, description, characters, a setting, and even a little conflict. These are all the elements of a really good story, so that's one to look at for an example. Okay, I'd better let you go get to work. Happy writing!